We tend to think of our seats of power, parliaments, government buildings, as these very orderly places,
Mm.
places where big decisions get made with, well, clarity and sobriety.
Right. But what if that picture isn't quite complete? What if there's more going on behind the scenes, elements we don't usually see?
Exactly. That's the, slightly unsettling ground we're covering today. We've looked at reports about cocaine traces found in parliaments across Europe, Germany, Belgium, the UK, Sweden.
And alongside that, there are these documented cases, reports of actual drug use among people in politics, but also in business, high-profile roles.
Yeah, so we've gone through news articles, investigative reports, trying to piece together what's actually known.
And the goal here isn't about, pointing fingers or being sensational. It's about understanding the facts. What does the evidence actually show? What could it mean?
What's the bigger picture? Okay, so let's dive into these, frankly, quite eye-opening findings from the heart of European governments.
Let's start in Germany. Back in 2000 and then again in 2005, there was this investigative work by a German TV program, Acta 2000, later Acta 05,
Ah, yes.
and they found cocaine residue in the toilets of the German Bundestag, the main parliament, and also the Berlin state parliament, the Abgeordnetenhaus.
Okay, that's pretty direct. What exactly did they find?
So in 2000, a reporter for ACT did these swipe tests, discreetly, of course, across 28 toilets inside the Reichstag building.
Right.
The samples then went to the Institute for Biomedical and Pharmaceutical Research. Professor Dr. Fritz Zergel oversaw the analysis and the results. 22 of those 28 samples came back positive for cocaine.
22 out of 28. That seems, well, pretty high. Were these just trace amounts, like negligible?
Well, interestingly, no. Some concentrations were apparently high enough that they might have even triggered a response from a drug-sniffing dog. Yeah, and the reports noted that the higher concentrations weren't just in any random public toilet. They were found in areas with less public access, the presidential level, near the offices of the political groups, the factions.
So closer to the actual centers of activity within the parliament.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They specifically mentioned the highest levels being near the toilets for the Greens' Bündnis 90 Grünen and the PDS, which was the precursor to Die Linke. So it suggests it wasn't just, a visitor passing through.
That does shift the perspective.
Hmm.
And what about the Berlin Abgeordnetenhaus, the state parliament?
Similar story there. Testing found cocaine traces, specifically in restrooms near the press rooms. Now, these areas are used by journalists, guests, staff. So maybe a slightly wider group than the faction levels in the Bundestag, but still within the building.
Got it. And how did the officials react in Germany?
The Bundestag administration, while they were initially skeptical, but they did say they'd look into the findings. The Berlin prosecutor, though, decided there wasn't enough initial evidence to launch a full criminal investigation based on those traces alone.
Okay, so moving on a few years, this wasn't just a German thing, right? The investigation went further.
It did. In 2005, Act 05 took their testing method to Brussels, to the European Parliament,
Right.
tested 46 toilets there, and this time, 41 out of 46 tested positive for cocaine.
41. Wow. Again, that's a huge percentage. What sort of quantities are we talking about?
The amounts varied from about 0.0008 micrograms up to nearly 20 micrograms, so definitely present across this major European institution.
It's important, though, like we said, finding traces doesn't automatically mean someone was using drugs right there in the stall.
Absolutely. That's a critical point experts always make. A cocaine residue can stick around. It can be transferred on clothes, on money, other things. So presence isn't proof of immediate on-site consumption.
Right.
But the fact that it was found so widely in so many places across these different parliaments, it does suggest the substance is, well, circulating in those environments somehow.
It definitely paints a picture of proximity, doesn't it?
Well,
Okay, let's shift over to the UK. What was found there?
in the UK, the Sunday Times reported on this. They found quite a significant amount, actually 50 micrograms of cocaine in a men's toilet in the House of Lords.
50 micrograms. That sounds like more than just a tiny trace.
It is relatively substantial in this context, yeah. They also found traces in the House of Commons, but apparently the levels there were too low to analyze further. So again, you see the pattern in another key legislative body.
And this isn't just ancient history, is it? This issue keeps cropping up.
That's right. Very recently, in January 2024, there was a report in Sweden. The newspaper Aftonbladet found cocaine traces in toilets linked to 4 political parties in the Swedish parliament, the Riksdag.
Which parties?
The Social Democrats, the Sweden Democrats, quite different ends of the spectrum there, the Left Party, and the Liberals. 4 out of the 8 parties represented.
And Sweden has a reputation for being very strict on drugs.
Extremely strict, zero tolerance, which makes the finding perhaps even more notable.
How do they test for it in Sweden?
They use these things called cocaine wipes. They turn blue if they detect the substance.
Okay. But they didn't just rely on that. They sent the positive wipes for proper lab analysis at the Karolinska Institute, a major medical university, which confirmed the presence of cocaine, so it's scientifically validated.
Given Sweden's tough stance, what was the reaction? Must have caused a stir.
Oh, absolutely. The parties involved expressed surprise, said they were taking it very seriously. They also made the point, similar to what we heard elsewhere, that these toilets aren't exclusive. They're accessible to journalists, staff, visitors, not just the MPs.
A fair point, but still.
Right. The Riksdag's security chief stepped up. They announced more awareness training for leaders, increased cooperation with the police. They underlined that they're committed to preventing this, especially given that zero-tolerance policy. It shows how seriously it can be taken.
It's striking, isn't it, seeing these traces pop up repeatedly. Germany, EU Parliament, UK, Sweden, across different political systems, different drug policies. It really does raise questions about how close these substances are getting to the people making the laws. It certainly does. And moving beyond just the traces found in bathrooms, our sources also detail some specific, documented cases of drug use by political figures themselves.
Right. These are individual situations, but they give a more direct view, I suppose.
Exactly. In Germany, for instance, there's the case of Ronald Schill. He was a controversial judge and later a senator in Hamburg, faced a lot of allegations about cocaine use. There was a hair test, though the results were disputed, and then video evidence emerged later in 2008.
Okay. Any more recent German examples?
Yes. Michael Hartmann, an SPD member of parliament, in 2014, he admitted using crystal meth. He said it was for about a month, and he blamed the intense pressure of politics.
The pressure argument. We hear that sometimes.
We do. His apartment was searched. No drugs were found at that time, and the case was closed with a fine. But it's an admission of using a pretty hard drug while in office.
And it's crucial to state here, while pressure is undoubtedly immense in these roles, resorting to illegal substances like meth or cocaine isn't a justifiable coping mechanism. Many people face intense pressure daily without going down that road. Accountability remains key.
Absolutely. Then there was Michelle Friedman, CDU member, prominent TV host too, caught using cocaine back in 2003. He withdrew from politics pretty quickly after that.
Right.
And just this year, 2024, Manuel Gava, also SPD, he admitted to regular cocaine use and ended his political career because of it.
So these aren't just rumors. These are confirmed instances involving politicians. It's a different layer to the story than just finding traces in a building.
Definitely. And it's not purely a political phenomenon either, is it? The sources point to drug use in the business and finance world, too, moving from the spotlight of politics to maybe the slightly more shaded world of high finance.
Yeah, let's touch on that.
Well, there's a famous historical case. Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano back in the 80s, he got caught up in this huge scandal involving money laundering for the Medellin cartel. We're talking vast sums of money, cocaine profits.
And his death was very suspicious, wasn't it? God's banker.
Exactly. Found hanging onto Blackfriars Bridge in London. Officially suicide, but rife with conspiracy theories. It shows the potential dark links between finance and the drug trade at the highest levels.
A dramatic example, for sure. What about today? Is there evidence of drug use in business now?
It's harder to get concrete proof, obviously, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, insider reports, suggesting cocaine use isn't uncommon in certain high-pressure sectors. Think investment banking, maybe management consulting, even the tech startup world.
Why those sectors specifically?
Often it's linked to the culture, intense pressure to perform, crazy long hours, this expectation to be always on. Plus, there's often a high degree of discretion, money, maybe an element of perceived glamour or exclusivity associated with it. The drive to get an edge, work longer, feel sharper.
Environments where the stakes feel incredibly high. And maybe the usual boundaries can blur for some people. Which brings us to the actual impact of using a drug like cocaine.
Absolutely. I mean, the short-term effects are why some people take it, right? Euphoria, feeling more confident, maybe more focused, like you can perform better.
But the downsides are severe.
Hugely. Physically, you're looking at increased heart rate, blood pressure, risk of seizures, stroke, heart attack. Long-term use can damage your nose, liver, kidneys, teeth, cause neurological damage. It's really destructive.
And psychologically.
Anxiety, irritability, depression, paranoia are really common. And cocaine is highly addictive. People build up tolerance, needing more for the same effect, and face nasty withdrawal if they stop.
For someone in a position of power, those risks seem amplified. Impaired judgment, overconfidence.
Exactly. That's the real danger in these rules, making reckless decisions, ignoring long-term consequences for themselves, their careers, the institutions they represent, their social integrity. The potential for damage is so much greater.
Which leads right into the crucial question.
Yeah.
How does cocaine actually affect decision-making? We mentioned that initial feeling of being sharper, more efficient. Is that real?
Well, the research suggests no. While users might feel more capable, studies actually show cocaine use is linked to increased risk-taking. People make more errors.
More errors.
More errors, and crucially, it seems to impair something called mental switching. That's your ability to adapt to new information, change tasks, think flexibly. In complex, fast-moving jobs, that's a disaster.
That inability to adapt. That sounds incredibly dangerous for leaders, for anyone making critical choices.
Precisely. Think about politics, law, medicine, finance. You need clear foresight, objectivity, sound judgment. If that's compromised, the consequences can be devastating and widespread.
Right.
Plus, cocaine use can sometimes lead to more impulsive behavior, maybe arrogance, being overly dominant in group settings. That poisons teamwork, good discussion, and then there's a lack of sleep, concentration problems that often follow. It spirals.
It's a sobering picture, especially when you think about the potential impact on decisions that affect so many people. Now, our sources also talk about cocaine being seen as an elite drug. What's behind that perception?
It seems to be a few things. Historically, its price made it somewhat exclusive, a status symbol almost,
Yeah.
associated with wealth, power, maybe access to certain circles.
And there's this idea, however misguided, that it helps performance.
Yeah, that dangerous myth that it enhances performance, stamina, even charisma, things valued in leadership roles. It's a complete distortion of the risks, of course.
So people might rationalize it because of the pressure, the responsibility.
That seems to be part of it, rationalizing it as a tool to cope or compete in these extreme environments.
Mhm.
And then you often have this code of silence in some elite circles. People might cover up or downplay drug use.
Hmm.
And sometimes, media portrayals, pop culture can kind of normalize it, even glamorize it, despite the grim reality for many users. It's a mix of factors feeding into this image.
A really complex mix. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things that stand out to you from everything we've discussed?
Well, first, the evidence is there. Both the traces found repeatedly in parliamentary buildings and the documented cases involving individuals show that these drugs are, at the very least, present in and around centers of power in Europe.
But we have to be careful. As we said, traces don't automatically equal widespread abuse by everyone there.
Absolutely, that's the necessary caution. But the proximity is undeniable. These substances are close to people making major decisions, people holding positions of trust, and that proximity itself raises serious questions.
Questions about the integrity we expect for these institutions, right?
Yeah.
And potential vulnerabilities. So the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. When you consider the immense pressures, the unique environments in politics and high finance, what are the broader implications here? What questions should we be asking about accountability, about well-being, without making excuses for harmful choices, and about maybe unseen influences operating within these powerful circles that shape all our lives? Definitely something to reflect on.